Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a Geneva morning that's a little bit of a preparation for us for Davos, looking outside at the frost. Thank you all for joining us. And to those watching, welcome too. This is the opening press conference for the World Economic Forum's 42nd annual meeting, which will begin next Wednesday, the 25th of January. Joining me here are Professor Klaus Schwab, the founder and executive chairman of the forum, to talk about the meeting's theme and his vision for the year ahead. Lee Howell, my colleague, who's the managing director and head of the Center for Global Events and the Risk Response Network, to talk about the program in Davos and exactly what participants will be discussing in sessions. Borge Brender, managing director, about public figure NGO participation and a new forum community. My colleague Robert Greenhill, who's Managing Director and Chief Business Officer, will talk about business participation. And my colleague Sarita Nayar will talk about some of the projects the forum is engaged in that will be developed during Davos. So welcome once again. And I'm going to begin by asking Professor Schwab to share with us his thoughts on this year's annual meeting and just why it's so important.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. When we look at the world today, politics, economy, society, we have the impression of a global burnout syndrome. Our 2012 Global Risk Report, which for those who do not have it, is available in the back, which was released last week, highlights some 50 key risks for humankind and shows that as the world grows increasingly complex and interdependent, many of those risks are simultaneously approaching a tipping point. The challenge is that we must confront all of those risks while we are still burdened with, I would call it, the sins of the past. We have certainly in the world today a morality gap. We are over-leveraged. We have neglected to invest sufficiently into our future. We have undermined social coherence. And we are in danger of completely losing the confidence of future generations. As a result, many people have lost trust in leadership and increasingly perceive life primarily in terms of hardship, devoid of opportunities and hope. In the Global Risk Report, we used the definition of dystopia, which is the opposite of utopia, and dystopia could precipitate a downward spiral of the global economy pulled by social disruption, protectionism, nationalism, and populism. The various Occupy and Spring movements, which we see and have seen last year around the world, provide clear signals of this understandable frustration and distress. The question is, what can we do? And what should we do without looking just for scapegoats and easy answers? First and foremost, we must recognize that solving problems in the context of our outdated and crumbling models and frameworks will only dig us deeper into the hole. With all the attention turned to crisis management at the moment, the fact is that the world has changed and continues to change in fundamental ways, and this change has nearly gone unnoticed. We are living in a great transformation driven by geopolitical, economic, social, and particularly technological forces. I want to mention just two of those fundamental transformations. First, the future will not be longer anymore determined primarily by the scarcity of capital, but rather by the shortage of human talent. The old model was capitalism, The new model will be much more talentism. Or take another example of a new model. The new model of leadership. The old model was predicated on hard power and increasingly maybe on soft power. But today, the new model of collaborative power or social power is the new model. Everything which we are doing will have to be co-designed to enable decisions that will be followed up and implemented. The next generation simply expects the democratization of decision-making. It is evident that in a world where half of the population is below 27 years old, the young generation wants to be part of co-shaping the future. Therefore, in addition to our traditional young global leaders who have participated in Davos, we will integrate this year a new community into the Davos interactions, a community of what we call global shapers, which we have created over the last 7 months, and which is already active in over 140 different cities of the world. The World Economic Forum will address those new models, and I just mentioned 2 as an example. The new model of leadership, the new model of capitalism, which is talentism. The World Economic Forum itself is a platform for collaborative thinking and a collaborative search for solutions. It's not a platform for decision making. It's a platform for collaborative thinking and collaborative search for solutions, integrating the best talents from all stakeholders of global society and recognizing that neither governments nor business nor civil society alone can solve all those global challenges we are confronted with. Therefore, the theme of this annual meeting this year is the great transformation shaping new models. Precisely because we are in an era of profound change that urgently requires new ways of thinking instead of more business as usual. We may need to break out of the mode of purely reactive crisis management as we have seen over the last months, and instead determine what new models are needed in order to fulfill the mission committed to improving the state of the world. The great transformation generates, despite my sober introductory remark, also tremendous opportunities for humankind and for all of us. We have the capability to live in a more prosperous, more peaceful world, in a world which is greener and socially more inclusive. This could be reality and not utopia. Therefore, what we want to do at the annual meeting in Davos this year is also not only to address the crisis situations, but to re-establish constructive and collaborative visions for the future. Our global crisis issues group, composed of the heads of major international and regional organizations, will issue a call to action in the next couple of days. But at the end, the decisive question in Davos will be, particularly in such a multi-stakeholder community, in such a multicultural and multinational environment, what is the ultimate purpose and what is the meaning of what we are doing? Let's clearly state it. It's finally a question of shared values, which we have to develop as a global community. I'm happy to know that in Davos there are many cultural, intellectual, and faith leaders to stimulate such a discussion on morality and ethics. My wish is that the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum 2012 is much more than an economic forum. It should be a forum for the future of global humanity.
Thank you very much for that. I'm turning now to my colleague Lee Howe. Lee, you've been tasked with building a program of over 200 sessions from this theme. Can you explain exactly what those sessions involve and how the meeting will unfold?
Certainly, Adrian. If I may, I'd like to share a bit, though, the context of the development of the program itself. It reflects really the contribution and engagement of all our forum communities. In fact, an interesting point there is that of the over 250 sessions, essentially nearly 1/3 of the participants in Davos are active in those public sessions. So we have about 1/3 of the participants in Davos in the public program in various discussion leader roles. But what I wanted to express was also the contribution of a particular community, the community of Global Agenda Councils. We have a network of 1,200 experts who, throughout the year, work on over 79 global issues. Now, they are very important, and they're a bit of the brain trust that helps develop the program. And, of course, they'll also be in Davos. There are over 400 members of the Global Agenda Councils who will be participating at the annual meeting. So I wanted to share that, a bit of context in terms of development of the program. With respect to the program, Professor Schwab highlighted really two key themes: the Great Transformation and the new models. With respect to that, we were going to start the program at the very beginning on Wednesday, looking at, obviously, the key one on top of minds of many people around the economy, and more fundamentally around capitalism. And we have a session really looks at the future of capitalism in this context as we go through this great transformation and explore new models. But with regard to Wednesday, what I wanted to share with you is, of course, is that there's no, I don't want to point out one region, but certainly on this side of the Atlantic, there is a great transformation happening, and there is a yearning for new models. And in that regard, we are very delighted that Chancellor Merkel of Germany will be giving the opening remarks at this year's annual meeting. And I believe her remarks will certainly set the stage and frame the discussions, not only in a European context, but certainly a global context with respect to the annual meeting theme. But also joining the stage at the opening is, and I want to reflect back on really the moral piece and the values piece, we're also delighted to welcome Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who I think will also share with us the importance of having a values context when we start to explore what these new models are and who they serve and for what purpose. But then on we have, of course, we organized 250 sessions, so there are sub-themes, and there are 4 of them that are quite important that I'll share with you briefly. The first, of course, growth and employment. We have to look at these two issues together. You can't have one without the other. I think it's pretty much on the top of minds of every member of society. In fact, I would call it the 100% issue. No, I don't think there's no capital in the world that doesn't discuss the importance of having growth and employment. And with that, in that regard, we have worked quite diligently with various top economists, many of them Nobel laureates that you're familiar with, like Joseph Stiglitz, Michael Spence, but also labor economists who also are Nobel laureates, Professors Diamond and Pissarides, who work on job creation, was actually what they were awarded the Nobel Prize in 2010, for example. But more importantly, we have the key stakeholders, the labor leaders and such, political leaders and the business leaders, who my colleagues on this dais will expand upon. But what I wanted to focus on was that in this area, we are looking closely at competitiveness, and there will be a number of sessions that reflect the findings of our Global Competitiveness Report. The second theme, and it was touched on by Professor Schwab, is leadership and innovation. And here I would add that what's really different in Davos is the intergenerational piece. We are working very hard with the global shapers, our young global leaders, to bring that generational perspective into these leadership issues. On the element of innovation, we've done some innovation ourselves. We've invited the leaders themselves to share one insight, one idea that they feel will be really breakthrough ideas in terms of leadership. Participating in those sessions, these one-to-one sessions, are actually some Nobel laureates like Muhammad Yunus. I mentioned Professor Michael Spence, but also scientists and Nobel laureates such as Murray Gell-Mann, among others. So we have leaders themselves and even some of our co-chairs going and actually sharing the one insight, the one idea that they feel will lead to innovation in the area of leadership. The third sub-theme is sustainability and resources, and it's obvious why we have to couple the two. But one of here, my colleague, I think Sarita, will expand upon many of our initiatives that led to the sessions on this sub-theme. But I wanted to focus that on Thursday we will start front and center with the issue of food security, where we've done a lot of work on, with this year having Bill Gates as well as Goodluck Jonathan, the president of Nigeria, speaking to that issue at the very onset. And lastly, there is a session on society, there's a sub-theme on society and technology. And here, I think unique to Davos, we're bringing not only those who are very active in social media, but scientists and researchers themselves. And we've approached it with our ideas labs. Now, you can visit our website, and we have a number of these prior ideas lab sessions online. But what I want you to take away was we've partnered with top institutions like the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Oxford University, the Santa Fe Institute, many others, and they're bringing the teams of their top professors to really expand on really what are the breakthrough new models with respect to how the interface of society and technology. And we have a number of ideas labs, and many of those ideas labs we will capture on video and will be available also on our website post-Davos. So Adrian, I wanted to just share those 4 sub-themes and a little bit of hint. There's 250 sessions. It's quite hard to pick your favorite. That's like picking your favorite child, so to speak. But I encourage you to explore the program, and we will have it obviously available also electronically. So I'll stop there, but with respect to an overview of this year's annual meeting.
Lee, thanks very much. Now, if I may, I can turn to Borge Brenda to just talk about the participation of public figures in this year's meeting. And we've already heard Mrs. Merkel's name mentioned. Can you tell us a little bit more about who will be participating this year in Davos?
Thank you, Adrian. We have unparalleled participation from governments and international organizations this year in Davos. 275 cabinet ministers, head of states, head of governments, and head of international organizations will be coming. 19 out of 20 G20 will be there at a high level. And we will have close to 40 head of states and head of governments in Davos. These governmental officials will interact in the multi-stakeholder community that Davos really is. They will interact with 1,600 business leaders, 150 leaders from civil society, NGOs, labor unions, faith leaders. Davos is taking place at the backdrop of the worst economic crisis since the 30s. And a key question that the finance ministers will have a look at is how to get the global engine started again. And we have the most relevant ministers. We have 8 out of the G8 finance and economy ministers present in Davos. We also have the head of the Bretton Woods institutions, Madame Lagarde, and also Bob Sulik, talking on the imperatives for 2012 and how to revive economic growth. We also have 18 of the key central bankers of the world in Davos, Mr. Draghi, and etc. We will also use the outcome of those discussions, feed it into the G20 agenda, represented by President Calderon, that has the presidency, bringing 6 of his key Mexican ministers to Davos. And also the U.S. has the G8 presidency this year. Timothy Geithner, the Secretary of the Treasury, will be there together with Secretary Napolitano, Home Security, and also Trade Representative Kirk. This will again be fed into sessions on trade, how to avoid protectionism under the leadership of Pascal Lamy and 18 of the key trade ministers of the world. Already mentioned Kirk, the U.S. Trade Representative, but also the Commissioner in the area. We'll also have a close look at the 600 million job challenge that we're facing in the coming decade. Mr. Somavia from ILO will be leading sessions on this, with also relevant ministers with that portfolio. This year is also the year of Rio +20. how to, again, get back on the sustainable track under the leadership of Foreign Minister Patriota and several Brazilian ministers and the relevant UN entities and the NGOs in the area, LEAP from WWF, Greenpeace, and etc. We will start the discussions on how to make sure that this is a successful outcome of Rio Plus 20. On the more regional agenda, it is a year since the great transition in the Arab world started. We will have the new Prime Minister of Tunisia in Davos in discussions with the two leading presidential candidates from Egypt, Amr Moussa and Tutu, looking at new governance models for Europe, together with the newly appointed Prime Minister of Morocco. And we will also have the Emir of Qatar that are playing an increasingly important role in the region, looking at new models for leadership and governance in the Arab world. While we're in this region, I would like to mention that the Jordanians have just initiated new proximity talks between the Palestinians and the Israelis. The new Jordanian Prime Minister will be in Davos, also in discussions with President Shimon Peres of Israel and Prime Minister Fayyad of the Palestine. Looking at also Africa, sub-Sahara Africa, we have unparalleled participation at the highest level from Africa this year. 7 heads of states and governments will be in Davos. Goodluck Jonathan from Nigeria, Jacob Zuma of South Africa, but also the new president of the newest country in Africa, Salva Kiir of South Sudan. He will be meeting a lot of business leaders and see how he can also make sure that one of the poorest countries in the world will have a new opportunity after the secession. This leads also into Mr. Martelly, the newly elected president of Haiti. 2 years after the earthquake that took 230,000 lives, Martelly will address the key business leaders of the world and also outline the perspectives of how to rebuild a country that almost lost everything. These are some of the things that are happening in Davos. In that respect, we of course will also have discussions of remodeling Europe with the new Danish presidency, Prime Minister Thorning-Schmidt. We'll be addressing this together with 9 EU commissioners that will be present. On the international organization side, the discussion on Africa, remodeling Africa, we will have Helen Clark from UNDP there. Also UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon will be addressing these questions together also with other important head of UN entities. Labor union leaders, there will be 15 labor union leaders in Davos, as I said, also together with the key civil society leaders, Amnesty International, Red Cross, etc. So I think Professor Schwab also mentioned this new community of the global shapers. When 50% of the global population is under the age of 27, these new voices have to be heard. And what we're making sure at this Davos is that there will be an intergenerational discussion between the young people and also those that more traditionally have been participating in Davos. I think we will shape the agenda, bringing these young people there, exceptional young entrepreneurs from all over the world. In 7 months, we have created 140 hubs. So the most impactful of these young people, altogether 70, will be with us in Davos, and I think we will notice their presence. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Borja. And I know for those of you who will recall the dramatic events in Tunisia last year during Davos, where we were joined right at the very end of the meeting by 2 new members of the provisional government, we're delighted to also be able to welcome the newly elected Prime Minister of Tunisia to the meeting this year. So that's another very exciting development for us. You mentioned the business leaders who those public figures will be addressing. Robert, could you give us a little bit more detail on business participation this year in Davos?
Well, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Birger just mentioned what an extraordinary representation from government and civil society and other key stakeholders will be at Davos. I'm pleased to say we're also going to have a very strong representation from business from across the world. There'll be some 1,600 business participants, including 1,000 at the CEO or chair level. Very strong distribution across the different sectors and geographies. We see the continuing trend where there will be a record number of business participants from the BRIC countries. We're now at a point where, for example, India will have more business participants than any country in continental Europe aside from Germany. And what's interesting when we look at the business leadership coming from the key emerging countries, we see a lot of the innovation leaders, whether it's the Suntechs in solar energy from China, or the Suzlons with wind power from India, or the Embraers with aviation technology from Brazil. We're actually seeing a level of participation in terms of the frugal engineering, frugal innovation ideas coming from business leaders in the South. Another element I would note you'll see in the public program that Lee mentioned, that business leaders are really here not just to be present but to engage. Because with these tremendous challenges there, and with business being seen as either part or, by some view, all of the problem, there's a sense that they need to also determine how they can be part of the solution. So my colleague Sarita and I will provide more details of some of these areas. I would just like to underline two of them. One in terms of the Partnership Against Corruption initiative, which is something the Forum has been engaged in for a decade, working closely with Transparency International, the OECD, and other key business and NGO leaders around the world on this issue. We have a record number of participants who have signed up to the Covenant on Anti-Corruption, including a breakthrough in Mongolia, which is a resource-rich country going through tremendous changes. And there's over 150 members of the Mongolian business community that actually signed up to the Partnership Against Corruption initiative over the last year. And I'll talk in a moment about the engagement on that and other issues with the G20. So that's one area which we think is particularly important when we look at the issues today in terms of complete transparency, focus on anti-corruption, and business leadership in that area. Another one is the role of business generally. There's a Global Agenda Council, one of the ones that Lee had mentioned, focused on the issue of role of business. What should the role of business be in terms of good governance on everything from compensation levels to incentive systems to executives, from shifting from short-term to a long-term focus, from a shareholder and financial focus to a broader engagement with other stakeholders, and understanding how their core business systems need to be linked in with emerging economic and social needs. That white paper has been distributed, and that will be a key part of the conversations and debates, including a major brainstorming session that we have organized early on in Davos to actually raise these issues right to the fore. The other element that I would just end with is working with the G20 leadership, France last year, Mexico this year, on a number of task forces focused on areas where business needs to be engaged in identifying the issues and providing the solutions. So we will be on Saturday under the sponsorship of President Calderon launching a number of key CEO task forces with, I might add, key multi-stakeholder and NGO involvement as well across a number of issues, including the issue of anti-corruption, the issue of green growth, the fundamental question of employment, and the challenging ongoing issue of food security, which Sarita will refer to in a moment, plus the issue of trade and investment and ICT and innovation. And we believe that with these 6 task forces, it's a way in which the energy, the perspective, the entrepreneurial drive of business can also be linked into the G20 process. For further views on what we're doing, I'd like to pass the mic over to Sarita.
Sure. I mean, as Rob was saying, it's very nice to welcome everyone here today, but Davos for us is really part of a year-long process that actually engages a number of issues that we work across, and Robert's referred to just a couple of them. My colleague Sarita Nayar can really fill us in on a few more of those projects and how they'll play out in Davos.
Thanks, Adrian. So as Adrian mentioned, we do work on many projects in the forum and on many issues, such as water, food security, climate change, health, to name just a few. And we do work on them all year round. Through these initiatives, we strive to develop global solutions to these issues, as well as to drive local action at the ground level. We work on many of them. Given the time constraint, I'll share 4 projects with you right now. The first initiative I'd like to talk about is on the topic of water. As you know, water is a very precious resource, and this is an area where forecasts would suggest that in another 20 years or so, we will see an increasing gap between supply and demand, taking it to almost a 40% gap between supply and demand by 2030. So the forum has facilitated the creation of the Water Resource Group, which is a public-private partnership that helps to create water reform. It is working with governments of many countries. Mexico and Jordan are 2 of them with whom we have done some detailed work around actually analyzing the situation, developing some policy guidelines, and then helping the government develop water reform, as well as ensuring that they are implementing sustainable water management practices. In Davos, on this topic, we will be looking forward to actually launching this partnership in a bigger way and creating it as an entity within the IFC so that the work can be expanded to a lot more countries. The second initiative I would like to refer to is in the area of food security. Food security was mentioned quite a bit already, and the initiative is called the New Vision for Agriculture. It's an initiative that aims to develop the agriculture sector with the mindset of creating food security, environmental sustainability, and economic opportunity simultaneously. The central goal of this initiative actually focuses on the smallholder farmer, which is very key to the sector, and it enables the smallholder farmer to access economic opportunity by providing access to technology, to financing, and to knowledge. On this initiative, we have more than 75 organizations involved globally, including 14 governments, 26 global companies, many international organizations, as well as farmer organizations across the globe, from Asia, from Latin America, as well as Africa. One of the partnerships within this initiative of New Vision for Agriculture is in Tanzania. And under the strong support and leadership of President Kikwete of Tanzania, who will also be in Davos, the partnership has developed an investment plan for Tanzania, for a specific part of Tanzania, engaging the farmers there, engaging business, engaging donors, and of course the government. And this plan will actually help deliver over $1 billion in farming revenue, as well as over 400,000 jobs in that area. The third initiative falls in the camp of climate change, and this one is called Green Growth Partnership. This partnership is also another public-private partnership, and it is helping emerging market governments to develop financing for their clean energy plans. Given the anticipated growth in the population, and there's an expectation that 60% of global GDP will be driven by emerging markets by 2030, many countries are developing investment plans, national plans around clean energy. However, the financing for these plans is still an area of opportunity, and this public-private partnership, or the initiative, helps attract private investment to these opportunities. So specifically in the area of solar energy, for example, this partnership has helped create some investments from the private sector in India itself. And recently, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change actually acknowledged and recognize this initiative as one of the 10 leading initiatives from across the world, which is focusing on scaling public-private partnerships to address climate change. And finally, but certainly not any less important, more recently we have launched an initiative in the area of cybersecurity. Within our global risk report, cyber risk is one that is identified. And this is an area that is becoming increasingly important given the whole digital world, growing world. In this area, the initiative that is just developing is called Partnership for Cyber Resilience, and it focuses on developing global resilience to deal with cybersecurity risks. And it has developed a set of principles that the chief executives of many companies are endorsing as principles that they will adopt and bring to their organizations as a recognition that organizations together have to drive the solutions here. So as you can see, many of these initiatives, and I only talked about 4, but many of them fall in the area of resource scarcity, which is one of our pillars for Davos. But in our attempt to drive global solutions on these issues, we are also enabling economic growth as well as job creation and employment. And as Robert mentioned and Borge mentioned, we are also taking these issues and helping drive some of these solutions through the G20 process and potentially through the Rio Plus 20 process as well. All these initiatives will be discussed in Davos in the sessions that Lee mentioned, as well as we will have detailed workshops around them to drive future directions on these issues as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarita. That's just an idea of some of the things that go on beneath the program schedule, which, as Lee said, is packed over the period of Davos. We will have our opening press conference at 11 o'clock next Wednesday in Davos. But in the meantime, we have a little bit of time for some questions. If I can ask you to say your name and your organization when you have a question. I'm joined in the room by a couple of colleagues if there are any specific questions that need addressing on some of the issues that haven't come up here. So can I just get a sense of who has a question, and we'll try and get round as many people as possible. So gentlemen there, and then we'll move around and we'll bring you a microphone to help out.
Yes, my name is Jamil Chad. I'm a journalist from Brazil, from Estado de São Paulo. I have a question to Mr. Howell. Out of the 250 sessions, at least I only found one on Latin America. Can you explain the choice of not perhaps having bigger sessions or bigger agenda for Latin America? And to Mr. Schwab, some years ago here, when the crisis was on its height, or at least in the beginning of its height, you said that you still believe that capitalism was not dead, or was the system. Do you still believe capitalism is the system to prevail, let's say?
Okay, that's a new model of questions because it's 2 for the price of 1.
Thank you.
We'll see if we can get a couple more in and just move around the panel. Gentleman just there, and the gentleman over there. And yeah, we'll come to you in a minute. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Ilya Dmitrichev. I'm from Russian news agency TASS, and my question is about Russian participation. Because the last year was Russian president who opened the session, and now I've seen the list, and there is not a lot of representatives of Russia. Maybe I'm mistaken. Why it's so? Maybe just Angela Merkel is opening the session. Why? Because the Europe, situation is so bad that it will be in the center of the discussion, or maybe you will answer.
It sounds like an opinion rather than the question, but we can certainly answer on Russian participation. So if I can just follow up on that. Lee, I know it's a global meeting, but that was a question really on regions.
It's a bit unfair because actually I read the whole program and I think we've just gotten it. In fact, there are a number of Latin American sessions. In fact, you should be aware that on Saturday there is a session exclusively on Brazil and the Brazil outlook. But I think you raise an interesting point, which is that you will see this year, with respect to the other update sessions, that Latin America has a very important global dimension to it. Sarita and Robert both touched on them, but I'll make it more explicit. We have the Rio Plus 20 process where we have sessions there, and clearly Brazil is very important in those sessions, in those discussions and proceedings. But also, we also touched on the G20, and as you're aware, the G20 presidency is with Mexico this year. So you will see a number of, not only President Calderon, but his ministers and his team very much engage in all of the sessions related to the issues that actually Robert elaborated on with respect to the G20 agenda. In addition to that, we have welcoming for the first time, for example, the President of Peru, and there'll be sessions around that. But I just wanted to know that quite unique this year is that the global dimension of Latin America is very apparent in the program through both Rio Plus 20 and the G20 process.
Klaus, you really, I think, laid out your views on where we are in terms of capitalism in your opening remarks. Is there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, before, I just want to mention, I think all other regions are well represented. And Birger, you may just add some of the regions which we left out, like India, Japan, and so on. Latin America is well represented. And by the way, the last evening, the cultural evening, which is a tradition of Davos, will this year be a Brazilian evening, and Brazil is represented by its key ministers. But coming back, I always said that capitalism needs to be reformed. But let me come back to my opening remark. I feel that the whole question of around capitalism to a certain extent is outdated, because the scarce resource which we have today in the world is not anymore capital. You can get capital nearly at 0% interest rate. The scarce resource is talent. And when we look at our competitiveness report, it shows clearly that talent will become, in the future, the most decisive factor of determining competitiveness. We are still, of course, very much influenced by the notion of capitalism. To respond to your question, I said, since 1971 in my book, I said capitalism is not shareholder maximization oriented. It's stakeholder maximization oriented. And that was the whole reason for the creation of the forum, to create a platform for all the stakeholders, which means business, governments, employees, trade unions, NGOs, and so on. That was the philosophy of the forum since the beginning on. I still believe in the free market as a main driver of economic development and social progress, but I also feel that the free market at the end has to serve society, and as I said in my opening remark, I am concerned about the development which we see at the present time, which means that we do not have an inclusive and a sufficiently inclusive development. To the contrary, the differences inside countries and among countries in terms of income levels come close, and we mentioned it in the competitiveness report, come close to an intolerable level.
Thank you, Klaus. And I know also that that talent scarcity and improving the available pool of human capital underpins our work on gender. If you look at our gender gap report, the global report that we issue each year, it benchmarks countries on that gender gap and really illustrates where bringing more women into the labour force and into the workforce can really benefit everyone in terms of social equality and furthering prosperity.
Can I make one
Sure.
additional remark as far as gender parity? We are not just talking about it. We will present in Davos, for example, a tool which will allow companies really to measure gender equality, which is more than just gender parity, in all different forms. So from just observing, we want to develop into a organization which provides also the tools helping people to measure themselves.
Thank you. Birger, can I just turn to you on Russian participation? Because I think you'll have some interesting observations on that.
Yeah, it's the elections are upcoming, as we all know, in Russia this spring. I think taking that into considerations. I think our discussions, for example, on new models for Russian economic growth, where former Finance Minister Kudrin will be addressing Davos, is very important. We also have First Deputy Prime Minister Shuvalov with us in Davos. We also have Economy Minister Professor Nabolina in Davos. So together with also exceptional Russian business participation, I think we have really the important Russian players. Also to have a discussion now on scenarios for Russia moving forward. Just following shortly up on what Professor Schwab also raised on a couple of other regions. I didn't want to be too long in my opening remarks, but we also have a very impressive representation from Pakistan with Prime Minister Gilani. The Foreign Minister and Finance Minister of Pakistan will be there, and that's seen together also with several cabinet ministers coming from India. We will also have then important discussions on South Asia. We know that India and Pakistan just made quite a staggering trade deal, so we're seeing that the trade between the two nations are increasing. We will have a chance to discuss this. Also moving a little bit east, the third largest economy in the world, Japan, playing also a more important regional role currently, will be represented at least at cabinet level with several ministers, and as it says also in the list that is distributed, the final composition of the delegation will be shared with you when it is also discussed in and accepted by the Diet. We also have the new Prime Minister from Thailand in Davos. We will head also with our regional summit to Bangkok this spring. On China, we had an exceptional summer Davos in September, where we had Prime Minister Wen Jiabao and several cabinet ministers. This Davos is taking place at the same time as the Chinese Spring Festival, but even with that fact, and also with taking into account that we had our summer Davos in China, we will have minister from NDRC, National Development Commission. We also have Donald Tsang, the chief executive from Hong Kong. Myanmar. Professor Schwab went to Myanmar. We went to Myanmar this fall. We met with Aung San Suu Kyi, and we met also with the new president. In Davos, we will have a representative for the first time in at least 2 decades from Myanmar, the industry minister representing the president, and we are also now in a dialogue with Aung San Suu Kyi. Professor Schwab had a follow-up conversation with her on Saturday, on also a representative for Aung San Suu Kyi to Myanmar.
Thank you for that.
To Davos, sorry.
And you'll see from the huge range of diverse participants why we try and sort of keep our opening remarks so limited, because we could keep you here for a couple of hours probably if we go through in detail all of the various communities represented. Can I just get a sense very quickly, and I'll ask a few minutes of who wants to get a question in, and we'll just try and go round. Gentleman at the end there, 2 gentlemen at the back. Can we just get a microphone to you? Oh, and this gentleman here, sorry, you have the mic.
Okay. Tom Miles from Reuters. Question for Professor Schwab. It's obviously another stellar lineup, so congratulations for that. But I wonder if it's a bit too stellar. Since the last Davos, this idea of 99% and the 1% has emerged. And I look at the brainstorming session that you're having on, how business should cope with the sort of new world that we're in, and it's still full of CEOs and leaders and such like. I wonder, did you think of inviting anyone from Occupy Wall Street? And if not, why not? Are you not otherwise in danger of becoming sort of caricature of a rich men's club and a lot of angry people on the outside.
Actually, I'll stop for a moment, because one of the things that is back there on the table is our open forum panels, which are open to everyone. It's our effort to share with people some of the issues that we discussed in Davos. One of those is on remodeling capitalism. Ed Miliband will be among the speakers. Larry Elliott from The Guardian will be sharing it. There'll be a number of international speakers on that particular panel. So there's a big part of Davos which sadly doesn't get reported on as much as the actual meeting, and I'm sure, Tom, you'll be helping to address that, which is devoted to actually taking these issues and sharing them more broadly. And certainly that does get a lot of attention, especially here in Switzerland, certainly in Europe, those sessions. So there is absolutely an open invitation to everyone who's interested in all these issues to come and talk about them and share with us, discussing them in the open forum context. So that's a big part of what the forum does. I know it doesn't get the same attention perhaps as the meeting itself, but with your help we can certainly change that. And I look forward to seeing certainly more of you in some of those sessions coming up. Can we just get round to the back?
Can I just make one remark, or actually two remarks? The first one is, as I mentioned also in my opening remarks, I think the key is not to go into the, let's say, blaming situation, which means if someone has to make a constructive proposition, not just to criticize, because criticizers will not bring us a step further. We have to have solutions. Everybody who can present solutions. We are looking desperately for people around the world who can offer solutions. That's the first comment. The second comment is we, based on our nature to integrate everybody, to be really inclusive, we are looking for such people who can make a interesting contribution. But the problem is sometimes, if you look at Occupy Davos, or Occupy Wall Street, or whatever it is, to have it's a movement, but who are really significant representatives of those movements? So if you can help, with pleasure.
I think also if you look at last year, the real organic movements we saw actually during Davos of the Arab Spring, you'll see those representatives in Davos now following up on those ideas, following up on what needs to be done in the aftermath of those revolutions and those changes. And I think that's really important moving forward. And certainly we're very pleased to welcome a really fantastic cast of people from the Middle East and North Africa, including the Tunisian Prime Minister. Just as we managed to do at the end of last year's meeting, to bring in the new changing regime in Tunisia. So can I just get round the room to two gentlemen at the back, and is there anyone else that we haven't had a chance to get to? Gentlemen there.
Yes, good morning. Jan-Dirk Herbermann, Der Tagesspiegel Berlin and other German language media. I have a quick question on your list of public figures. Apparently the federal president of Germany has cancelled his participation at Davos. Can you confirm that, and could you give us, or could you tell us whether he has explained his decision?
Okay, can I just get another couple of questions, because I think we're going to have the last minute. We don't normally go into our invitation policy as a matter of respect to those people we do invite and share those details, but
yes,
gentleman there.
Boris Engelson, a local freelancer. Two quick questions, one to Professor Klaus Schwab, another one to Mrs. Sarita Nayar. To Professor Schwab, a body encompassing all stakeholders and not just shareholders is usually called a government. Should we understand that the World Economic Forum is the government of the world? And to Mrs. Sarita Nayar, you mentioned an initiative to mobilize, to engage farmers worldwide. The vast majority of farmers of farming is family farmers, for whom nobody can speak so far, not even FAO nor ILO. Do you think it is time to create an ILO of farmers?
Okay, interesting questions. And we have a couple more down at the back. Gentleman in the blue, I think, had his hand up. And And that will probably be our remit. And there's a gentleman just at the front after. So.
I have a learning question, please, because I couldn't find it in the program. And when is the Chancellor, in fact, the German Chancellor, opening the session? What day and time is this? And Professor Schwab, with this, when you call the world coming to you. We can see this from this incredibly impressive program. But I wonder, with all these people coming together, isn't this a little bit project overkill in the sense that these people have not the time maybe to reflect, which I think is something you always try to encourage and facilitate, to reflect and maybe go into details and trying to find solutions, which we can see with the financial crisis, they obviously can't find with all the talents and experts we do have. Thank you.
Understood. We can certainly just give you those details. And there's just a gentleman at the front there with a question.
Hi, Giles Broom from Bloomberg News. Professor Schwab, you mentioned we are over-leveraged. You said there is a morality problem. I just wondered if you could expand a bit on some of the excesses that you see around the world that you think will be curbed in a 21st century version of capitalism.
Okay, just to pick back up on some of those questions, I think I'm going to ask Sarita. We're an impartial organisation, so we're not an advocacy or lobbying organisation, but just in reference to that need, or is there a missing element in representation for farmers? Do you want to just pick up on that?
I think that's a very important point. And a couple of things I would mention. One is that actually we will have real farmers in Davos. And we have, in the last 2 to 3 years, tried to engage their voices into the conversations. There are regional farmer associations that we have also brought in, which are more representative of the farmers. And in our regional summits, this past November in India and also in Latin America and Africa, at our regional summits, we have engaged regional farmers as much as had farmers on our panels as well. So increasingly, we are trying to bring that voice in because we realize that that is a very important group, both in terms of driving solutions, but also in terms of the group that needs to get the benefit.
And just on that, I mean, I know we're not an advocacy organisation, but we do identify sort of governance gaps. Is it something that your work's throwing up, the idea that there is a need for an organisation to coordinate those organisations on a global level, as the ILO does for labour?
Right. So there is actually a global farmers organisation. I think there is an opportunity for this organisation to drive more impact, and we are working with them as well.
Okay. And Klaus, just to turn to Giles's point on morality and over-leveraging, and if you could expand a little bit on your opening remarks and perhaps bring us to a close.
Yeah, so there are three points which I want to take up at the end. As far as the excesses are concerned, I mean, I just have to look at your products every day. I think it would be wrong to mention them. We are all aware of those excesses, and I think Davos is a place, and I come back to the question mentioned before, the World Economic Forum is not a government. Let me explain very clearly what we are. We don't take decisions. It's a gigantic brainstorming. We are living in a very diverse world, and I think the last years have shown that we go, on the one hand, into a global world driven by technology, but nation states, local issues become again important. So if we want to find solutions for the manifold global problems and challenges, we have to understand each other. So Davos is, I would say, a melting pot of ideas and opinions. Where you have all the stakeholders, all the countries integrated. But second, and I come back to the question of complexity, Davos is not a place where, like what we find in the world everywhere, where you deal in a very departmentalized way with one issue. You have the trade issue, you have the health issue, and so on and so on. Davos is a place at the beginning of the year which mirrors all the issues in the world. And if we want to find solutions, we have to find holistic, integrated solutions. Today, economy is interwoven with politics, it's interwoven with society, it's interwoven with technology. So Davos brings all those people together. What is coming out, we are only partially in control by creating a program, by creating many opportunities for discussions. So what we are expecting from Davos this year to come to a conclusion is that all the participants become aware of the multitude of challenges which we have to solve. We arrange the necessary constellations that they can come together to look and to discuss some of the solutions for those problems. And I hope in this respect we will have a very successful meeting 2012.
Klaas, thank you very much. My colleagues, thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here. And for those of you watching live, we hope very much you'll be able to join us on YouTube in our sessions that are live streamed throughout the meeting, also reported on social media. And if you're in Davos itself, you're very welcome to come to our open forum events, which have a packed schedule, which is at openforum.ch, www.openforum.ch. And for those of you in the room, you'll be able to find more details of that at the back. So thank you all again, and look forward to seeing you in Davos in a week's time.